Gosh, it feels strange sitting in a caravan, staring at myself so big on the screen. This is a story that comes from the Iroquois people, Native America. And there's a lot of debate about whether other people are allowed to tell their stories, but since it was published in a book, I'm going to tell it because I like it. It's called Stonecoat Woman. Let's try again. There were 4 hunters, and with them, the wife of one of them with their young baby. And they built a lodge of elm bark on the side of a lake, far from their home. And then the 4 hunters went off in different directions to hunt. While they were doing that, the woman was gathering water from the spring when she heard singing coming from the lodge where she'd left the baby sleeping. She rushed back. There was singing. There was the baby cooing. There was the baby screaming. There was the singing starting again. She pulled aside the curtain of the door, and there was a gigantic woman, a real giant of a woman. Her skin was like flint. And she was singing to the baby. She was singing to the baby that she was cradling her arms by their fire. Oh, so good to eat. So, and the baby was cooing, but then when she stopped, she bent down and she bit a piece out of the baby's cheek. And the baby screamed, and she stroked the baby's cheek with her finger, and it healed up. And the baby cooed again when she sang again. The woman was frightened. Her legs wanted to run. Stone giants eat people. But she couldn't leave a baby. She could wait for the hunters, but what could they do? The stone coat woman could crush them. She must be brave. She must be clever. So she smiled and she walked into the lodge. Hello, mother. Hello, grandmother. Welcome to this place. And Stonecoat Woman smiled a smile wide enough to swallow a moose. And she said, I am glad I have come to this place. Thank you for greeting me as a relative. I've come to the right place to ask for help. And she sat down by the fire and she calmly waited, while the young woman clutched her baby to her on her side of the fire and wondered. Meanwhile, her husband was having very little luck hunting. It's as if something had eaten everything in this part of the forest, he said. Maybe the stories about stone giants were true. And at that moment, the ground started to shake like an earthquake, and there was a pounding, a regular pounding, the pounding of stone feet, and he had just had time to scramble into a hollow, rotting log that had fallen before 2 stone giants crashed into the clearing, pushing the trees aside as if they were reeds. Mother, I thought you said there was food in this clearing. Well, so there was, said the other one. Saw it coming this way. Look, it was here. And through a knothole in the log, the hunter saw a giant hand pick up his bow, looked like a twig. There was an ominous creak from over his head as one of the giants sat down on the log, and he was sure he'd be flattened, but mercifully it held. Well, if he's here, we can sniff him out, said the stone giant. And he prayed that the smell of the rotting wood would be strong enough. Or, said the other one, we can use pointing finger. And through the knothole in the log, the hunter could see the giant hand, and he could see the other hand placing on it a single finger, which stood quivering upright, just like an arrow that's been shot into a tree. Pointing finger. Show us where our food is. And the finger bent and pointed straight towards the hunter. Even as the giant was scrambling in one end of the log, he was scrambling through the log and out the other end, running fast. He was swift, but he knew that no matter how fast he ran, the stone giants would catch him in the end, because they had pointing finger, and wherever he went, pointing finger would find him out. And then he saw a tree with a branch hanging right across the trail, and he had an idea. He was up that tree faster than a red squirrel. He was lying on the branch silently. There's two stone giants crashed to a halt right underneath him, where the footsteps stopped. "Food, where are you?" And they looked all round, but of course they couldn't look up because their stone necks were too stiff. They hadn't the imagination to work out where he was. "Where's Food gone? I said we should have gone hunting moose." And eventually, Pointing Finger. So they got Pointing Finger out and put it on the palm where it stood, quivering like an arrow shot into a tree, pointing straight upwards. Pointing Finger, where is our food? And of course, Pointing Finger stayed pointing straight upright. "Said we should have gone hunting moose." "Be quiet," said the other one. "I cannot think while you talk." "Brother, you cannot think while you talk. What do you mean by that?" And soon they were squabbling beautifully. And the first stone giant was pounding the ground with his club, and the second stone giant put down Pointing Finger so that he too could pound the ground with his club. And of course the hunter slipped down the tree, grabbed the finger and ran. And because he had Pointing Finger, he could outwit them now because he knew where they were. He came to a stream, swift and deep, swam across it, holding Pointing Finger over his head very carefully. On the far side, and there were the two stone giants. "Hey, little Food, come back. Bring my Pointing Finger. Then we will be very happy before we eat you." "Brother, if you tell him we're going to eat him, he won't come back." "Oh, yeah." "Hey, little Food that runs fast and looks good to eat. Bring my Pointing Finger back and I will not tell you that we are going to eat you." Truly, you cannot think when you speak. "Do you mean this?"
We're not doing a handsy, are we?
No.
Holding it up. "Do you mean this?"
I can't remember what you did.
"Well, I don't feel like coming back across the stream to you. It's cold. I don't want to get wet again. But you're big. You lean out across the stream." And he held his hand out with Pointing Finger. And the giant leant out across the stream. And the hunter pulled his hand back a little way. And the giant leant a bit further. And he pulled his hand back a bit further. And the giant leant, and with a resounding crash and a roar, the giant fell headfirst into the stream and was dead, leaving the other giant roaring on the far bank. The hunter ran to the elm bark lodge. "Wife, I have such a story to..." And then he saw Stonecoat Woman sitting on the far side of their fire. "Husband, hello. Will you not say hello to our relative who's come to stay with us?" "Hello, grandmother. You are, welcome in this place," he said, sitting down carefully by his wife and never taking his eyes off Stonecoat Woman. She looked. "I'm glad that you welcome me as a relative," she said, "and I see I have come to the right place for help." And she smiled that smile wide enough to swallow a moose. And then she sat calmly and said nothing else until the other three hunters had also come back and, prompted by the wife, had greeted her as a relative. And then she said, "I know I have come to the right place because I see you are holding Magic Pointing Finger, and that means you have killed my husband's brother." And then she explained her husband had been beating her cruelly, and so she'd run away from him, looking for a place that was safe. And she knew she had come to the right place, and she would help them if they helped her. It was agreed. And that night she slept outside the lodge on the ground to protect them across the doorway. But next day, "Take me hunting with you," she said. And between Pointing Finger and Stonecoat Woman's strength and her way of singing animals up out of their holes and down out of their trees, they had good hunting. And they soon had, after several days, they had enough pelts and enough meat to take back to their village. They were well fed themselves, and Stonecoat Woman, she was very happy because she was very well fed. But then one morning they came out of the lodge, and she was standing. "My husband, I have heard. He knows I'm here. He is coming. He means to kill me and to eat you. But if you are very brave, you may save some lives." You must take basswood spears, sharpen them, harden the points in the fire, hide. When he comes, I will fight with him. If I fall, creep up behind him and plunge your spears into him from behind. While she was saying this and while they were getting ready, the woman bundled up those pelts into 4 bundles, put them in the canoe so they looked like 4 more people, and paddled out with her baby into the lake. And soon they felt the ground shake. They felt that regular, rhythmic pounding of stone feet, and the stone giant crashed into the clearing, pushing trees aside as if they were reeds. He saw the canoe with people in. He waded out into the lake, and Stone Coat Woman waded out to meet him. And they fought. And they came back to land, and they plucked up whole trees, a pine tree, a hemlock tree. They battered each with them until the trees were pulped. They found rocks the size of grown bears, and they hurled them at each other. But neither of them seemed able to beat the other, until Stone Coat Woman caught her foot on a root and tripped and fell. And Stone Giant crashed on top of her, meaning to kill her. But that's when the hunters came out from behind their rock with their basswood spears and plunged them into him from behind, and he was dead. Stone Coat Woman said, as she picked herself up, "Oh, I think we have saved each other's lives. It is time for me to move on. There are no more stone giants to trouble you." And by way of thanks, she gave the woman a pelt of many different furs, many different hairs all in one fur. "When your man hunts," she said, "pluck out one of the hairs, just one, and that is the animal he will catch that day." And she went, and they went back to their own village. And between the pelts they had got and the meat they had got, a magic pointing finger and the magic belt, the whole of their village lived well for many years to come. And that is the story of Stone Coat Woman.